Hello and welcome. I am Kim Keene, host of the One of a Kind You podcast. I started this podcast to share my journey of my past self, a woman who was struggling with leaving her teaching career and adjusting to stay-at-home mom life, to help other women with their motherhood journey so they can let go and make themselves a priority without all the sacrificing. So if you're a regular listener here, thank you so much for tuning into another episode of One of a Kind You. If you're a new listener, thanks so much for taking a chance and stopping by to see what it's all about. I'm so excited to have you here. And so the way that this podcast usually works is I share a journal entry of mine from 5 or 6 years ago when I was in the thick of the struggle. And I talk about what I wish I knew then and what I know now as a certified life coach. But you're in for a treat because you don't have to listen to me blabbing away by myself. I have two ladies joining me today, Beth and Chelsea, both working moms. Both have, well, Chelsea, I know, has the entrepreneurial spirit. She owns a dance studio and a palm team. And then, but I'll let them fill in all the gaps. But before I do that, I just want to take a minute and say that this episode of One of a Kind You is brought to you today by the Be Well, Be Safe, Be Happy, Eat Ice Cream podcast, but more for our sponsor later. So thank you, Beth and Chelsea, for joining me.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we're excited to be here.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Beth, tell us about you first.
Okay, where to begin? No, okay, so I am a full-time employee. I work for a large organization that's more of a regional organization, Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. So Chelsea and I both live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I am in talent acquisition. So I'm a corporate recruiter, and specifically that works with technical recruiting. So IT recruitment. I've been married to my wonderful husband for almost 11 years. And I have two children that are 9 and 4. School is almost done. This is our last week. Oh my gosh, I cannot wait. So we had the last hustle today. So I'm excited for that. And, we started our podcast in February of this year.
And
just
I love
kind
the
of
name. It's called
Moms with Attitude.
Love it.
Chelsea's more the attitude, and I'm, we're both the moms.
So the yin and the yang. I love that you balance each other out.
Yes, we balance each other out for sure. We've been friends for 25 plus years, which is, if you can do the math, you're going to age us, or I just aged us. So, but we do on our podcast talk a lot about almost being 40.
And Beth doesn't age, actually.
Right.
So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah.
So.
All right. And Chelsea, take it away.
Okay. So I own a dance studio, a competitive dance studio. So we compete a lot, travel a lot. I love it. I just did my 12th recital last night.
Congrats.
Thank you. I'm also a high school pom coach. And then I also run an all-star dance program, which has, close to 60 kids in it. So it's fun. Dance is my life. I, graduated from Oklahoma State, and so did Beth. So go Pokes.
Go Pokes.
Yeah. My undergrad was actually political science and pre-law. So I thought I was going to go to law school and be a lawyer, but I own a dance studio. So
because they mesh so well.
Yeah, they do, actually, probably more than I know, because a lot of parents like to argue.
Yes.
So
yes. And my husband's an attorney, so we always joke that the attorneys take all the fun out of things. Like, you need the attorney to have all those legal things so that the parents have to sign off, like, that you're not liable for any of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I have 2 kids, a 12-year-old girl, Paisley, and a 2-year-old son, Grayson.
You have quite the gap.
Yeah. We must have been bored. But I am.
Well, it's one way to pass the time.
It is, I'm actually divorced, but I currently,
you have a partner.
I have a partner.
You have a life partner.
I give a lot of slack to him because we're not engaged or married.
Right.
So.
How long have you been together?
Well, this is a little telling, but
Oh, did I ask too much?
No.
I mean, it's not too much for me. I don't know about your podcast
Nope.
audience.
Hey, I am like, I don't hold back. So
Okay.
real and authentic is what we go for.
Okay, well, so you know, it's like those reality shows like Married at First Sight. We kind of did Baby at First Sight.
Okay. Hey.
Okay.
Yeah, that you're onto something. So there's a new reality.
Hey, there's a new,
show.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. You need to hit up Nick Lachey and Vanessa.
Sure.
And, you know,
pitch
So
it. They would totally be on board.
Yeah. Well, so we've been together like 3.5 years, and you know, it's great. We are a lot. Actually, Beth introduced us. They used to work together as recruiters. So and he had never been married, doesn't have kids. He's older than me. He lived the hardcore bachelor life.
he was like the definition of a bachelor. And I remember he came into the year that they met and was like, new year, new me. And literally that's what he meant, was new year, new me. Like, none of us knew what that meant, but then we found out 3 months later what that meant.
Like that's all they wrote.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then
it was destined. It just happened. So he's really funny. So that's really helpful because I need that a lot.
Yeah.
But he's also
humor.
Yeah, but he is very type A, and I am not.
No.
I appreciate type A, but I am not.
Yeah.
So, and I'm always up for a hustle, you know. I am.
She is. She works really hard.
Yeah, and I just am like, oh, a new opportunity. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
So that's kind of me.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I love that you two are the yin and yang and you balance each other out. And then Beth introduced you to the other yin and yang. And so now you have another way to balance you out.
Yeah.
It's great. I love it.
Yeah.
She knew what I needed.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what happens when you're friends.
Because she's actually pretty type A too.
Yeah, I'm very type A, and Chelsea and I
like recruiter, you have to be a type A.
Oh yeah,
right?
for sure. Yeah. Chelsea and I like never. It was weird. Like we never actually officially lived together. In college or even after college, even in high school. But Chelsea would like come and stay at my house that I grew up in for like a few weeks.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I mean, so we kind of lived together.
Yeah.
But then even in college, we were never like roommates, which is kind of weird.
She actually told me she didn't want to room with me, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Well, if we're being honest, my mom was like, that may not be the best for your friendship. And so she was like, I wouldn't recommend rooming with your best friend because you may not be best friends.
But we were in the same apartment complex.
Yeah. But
so that's good. Enough space, but you still are together.
Right. Yeah. So I would always go to Chelsea's house and do her laundry because it would drive me crazy. She would just have clothes everywhere.
It's true.
So anyway, so I introduced her to
and
the person
now
that would.
Tony does my laundry.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Isn't that
perfect.
Crazy?
So I introduced her to the male version of me.
That is hysterical. I love it. So before we actually hit record, we were chatting. So there are a few things that we're going to chat about today, but we're going to first start with Beth telling me that funerals are the new date night.
Hey, you got to get it in whenever you can.
So just to give some background about that, so we were chatting, pre-gaming before the record button was hit. I was like, so what do you ladies feel like chatting about today? Like, what about our mom life do we want to talk about? And Beth was like, well, my husband, maybe mom guilt, because my husband and I were going to go away for the first time without the kids. I mean, she was like, because like funerals don't really count. And I'm like, wait, a funeral is a date night for you? Well, first of all, how many funerals do you go to? And if it's that many, I'm so sorry for your loss. But I'm like, okay. So, Beth, I think you need that vacay with the hubs without the kids. And I think you should not feel guilty about that at all.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, no. So I'll put a little bit more context into that. So, my husband and I actually have, and I'm not trying to bring the mood down, but in the last couple of years, we have lost several people in our lives. And so
It feels like those
it feels like because we've had to travel for a couple of days without our kids. And so that's why I was saying like funerals don't count, because there have been a couple of times where we've gone out of state for like 2 days for a funeral. And I'm like, well, we weren't with our kids, but that really wasn't fun. So that's why I say that, but you guys are really funny, because I've actually said that a lot. And now I'm like, I hadn't even thought about it, but now I'm like, wow, we look really desperate for a date night.
I'm actually probably going to say it 25-ish times this week.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Anyway, but people laughed and they were like, oh my gosh, that's so true. And I'm like, anyway, so
no, but I think it's the truth, whether it's a funeral or like the joke was we just moved in October. So like we closed on our Maryland, like sold the Maryland house and relinquished that to the new owners in September. And then we had to live with the in-laws for like 7 weeks before we could get into this house. And so, so like having no time, like, cause same, like my husband and I, when we go anywhere, our kids always come with. And so, and with his work schedule, it's like sometimes hard to schedule a date night, even though he's not in the office as often as he used to be, and like lining up childcare and all of those things. And so we jokingly said, we're like, wow, like we're going to close on a house. Like we could go to lunch afterwards and like make of it. And so it's like, it's the real deal. It's like as a couple with kids, you're always trying to find that time to squeeze in to have a moment of just the two of you to like connect as humans without like kids in tow or spilling lemonade on the table in the restaurant or whatever, and be like, oh my God, can we have more napkins, please? Can we have more ketchup? Like, it's like just have a glass of wine and just eat in like silence, maybe, because that sounds really lovely sometimes too.
For sure. Yeah, I know. But then sometimes I feel like my husband and I end up talking about our kids. And so then it's like trying to redirect the conversation to talk about things that maybe are not about our kids, and so sometimes that's a little bit of a challenge, I feel like. And I don't know if you guys have that same, where like we kind of just, gradually go to like, oh, well, so-and-so has, like one kid has this week and blah, 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 and just get into that rut versus like, like just talking about kind of either us or him or me or, does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I think just to add on that, something that's been helpful, other than the fact that Tony was single for 40 years. So he's not really used to like, he's used to date nights. So, but we have an app that we both use. It's called Coupleness. And so every day there's a question on there for each of us to answer. Yeah. And we each answer it. So we probably go on enough dates. But on last Saturday, we went on one and we talked about every question from the last month that we had on there, like in depth, we just went through each question and like kind of reviewed our answers. So, it forces those conversations rather than feeling like attacked, like I want to talk about this.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's it.
It's kind of fun. Some of the questions are fun, but some of them are like, oh man, who's going to answer this one first?
Yeah. You're like, not me.
Yeah.
Like I picked you.
What should I say? Yeah.
As the attorney, I do not answer first.
Right. You're like, I plead the fifth until you answer, and then based on your response, I can decide what my response is going to be, and maybe I still don't want to answer the question.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just give them a solid smiley face.
Right. You're like, this says it all.
Yeah.
No words needed.
I put a little emoji sometimes instead of an answer.
Yeah.
Like, are you sure that's right?
So, but why do you think we feel like the mom guilt? Like, where does the mom guilt come from leaving the kids behind?
I don't really know. I just feel like it's just there. It's something that I think I've definitely thought a lot about. And so just so your audience knows, my husband and I haven't been on a trip by ourselves since 2015. And
A
so
long time, Miss
it's a
Beth.
long time. And last year we had planned on going somewhere for our 10-year wedding anniversary, and then like COVID and blah, blah, blah. So
Yeah.
we just decided to just hold off. And so this year is like, we're calling it our COVID comeback, because we legit have had something every single month since March. And so, so this is our like comeback year. And so we decided to book a trip with some friends. And, I just, I like for my kids to have experiences in life versus like, the material things, because those things only last for so long.
Yes.
And I think for me, like growing up, my parents rarely took trips by themselves. I mean, I remember staying with like a babysitter maybe once or twice. And then every other trip we were with them. And it was like long 2-week vacations.
I was going to say, I remember her going on trips thinking to myself, like, do you really want to go on that trip? Like,
yeah, they were like driving vacations, because my parents hated to fly. And so we would all pack in this like, 10 passenger van that my mom had for her daycare. And we would just travel the country
to the mountains. And
we would go to like the beach, or we'd go to the mountains. And so I think just growing up, that's what I was accustomed to, is like, like you go, your kids go with you. And so we just have done that. And my husband was the same way. Like his parents rarely took vacations by themselves. And my dad came over, this has been a couple of years, and we had a couple of years ago, and we had some pictures on our refrigerator of the family like at a beach or something. And he was saying to his partner at the time, like, yeah, they just take their kids everywhere like we did growing up, or like when Beth was growing up. And I was just like, oh, it's the cycle. And so, and I mean, again, I love being with my kids, but I also know that like, it's really good to have time with your spouse, because it, eventually they're going to be gone. And so I think we're trying to like make sure to do that, but it is hard, like just with activities and stuff. So I always feel guilty. And I feel guilty even if I leave the house to go do something with like her, and my husband's here, and, like he's watching the girls for a couple hours. It's just like weird. I don't know where that comes from.
Yeah. I used to feel that way too, because I felt like I was almost like shirking my parental responsibility to my kids. And I don't know if that's because I grew up with parents who were divorced. So I was bebopping back and forth every other weekend to my dad's house and then my mom's house. But I will tell you, there were times where I would be at my mom's house for the weekend, and my dad and my stepmom would go away for the weekend without me. And coming home, I'd be like to say to myself, like, oh, they must not love me because they didn't wait for me to go on this trip. Now, my mom and my stepdad never traveled without us kids. That's a whole nother can of worms. But like when we did, like we had an RV and we would drive it down to the beach for the weekend. Also, a whole nother thing. But same thing. Like I felt guilty going away, like just out to dinner with a girlfriend for a couple of hours. But then like even the thought of leaving my kids for just like a long weekend for my husband to go away, I felt so guilty, because I felt like, oh my gosh, they're going to think that we don't love them, or someone's going to think I'm a bad mom because I left my kids with someone else for the weekend, or God forbid, I'm like actually going out with girlfriend time, like for girlfriend time. But like, honestly, like who cares if someone thinks that? It's none of their business. And I know it's easy to say like, oh, it's none of their business what they think. But I had to start like thinking to myself, Kim, you're kind of like miserable because you feel like you're on all the time and you never get a break. So like you are entitled to have that time. And like my husband, he'll go to the gym in the morning and take his sweet old time coming home, but like stop and get himself a smoothie. I'm like, you big jerk, where's my smoothie? I mean, not really, but when I go to the Y, I'm like, I do my class and I like zip on home, like have to get home. But I just think it's different for guys. They have like such a different perspective. Like if I stop and get smoothies, I get one for all of us. Not
same. Yeah. I don't know if it's just like a maternal thing because we carried them, they were with us for so long, and then we birthed them and went through all of that. And so, but I mean, I'm the same way. I don't, I think you are, where like I'll go somewhere and I'll be like, I'm only gonna be gone for like 10 minutes.
Oh,
and,
no,
you know,
that's not me.
and
actually.
I'm just like, why do I do that? Because, you know, my husband and I think we communicate well with each other, and I try not to put any kind of like time frame or anything like that on him. And he goes and hangs out with his friends or whatever. And the expectation from him isn't, you know, it's the same for me. It's like, you go out and enjoy your time too. But for some reason, I'm like, I'm only gonna be gone for a couple hours. I'm gonna go eat and I'm gonna come back and I'll help you with bedtime or whatever. But you know, I don't know. It's just, it's weird why we're like that.
I think personally for me, so my oldest is 12, my youngest is 2. So parenting at different stages in my life has been like drastically different. Obviously, I'm divorced. So the parenting, you know, with my first, we were super close. We're so much alike. And she didn't want to ever leave my side, like ever. And then parenting as I'm older and divorced, I think, you know, it's like hindsight is, you know, if you obviously don't work on the relationship, it won't work.
Yeah.
So you have to, I think for me, it's like that perspective is always there, and trying to figure that out. I think mom guilt for me doesn't necessarily it comes from, I don't want to say uneducated, but I'm going to say uneducated views, maybe from, I guess, inexperience is a better, like from Tony, not knowing like how to feel or why to feel a certain way, because he's a first time dad. And then for me, all mom guilt comes from my kids for the most part, like just like how they respond and how I make sure that they feel a certain way. My 2-year-old is a savage. Like because I travel a ton, and when I go out of town, he straight up will not even talk to me on FaceTime.
Right. And they know that like rips your heart right out of your chest, and then they stomp all over it, and they know it.
Yeah, they do. He just would like, I'll be like, I love you so much. And he's just like, where's my airplane? And then Tony's always like, talk to your mom. He's like, sissy. Like, it's just like, it's advertently obvious that he's like
intentional with it. Yeah.
And then I wonder,
and
like,
he thinks it's kind of
how
funny.
to do that.
I know.
Yeah, you're 2, bro. Like, why? He is really, But you know, what's funny is that might be an what's the word? An innate.
Yes.
From his dad's side of the family.
Oh.
Like that's just like, in my daughter, you know, it's the complete opposite. She is like, I'm gonna soak up any second I get with her. And I think I promote a ton of boy time now. Like if Tony will be like, I have to come home, or I can't, Grace, I'm like, you can't, because I don't want you to ever tell me I can't hang out with or do with or go with, or, oh, you're going out 2 nights in a row. Like I have like, so I like promote it. I'm like, don't you need to go out with your friends? You haven't been out with them in a while.
Right. Because Chelsea's like, because actually in 3 days, I have a planned date with my friends. So I need you to know that this, like, we're reciprocating these nights out with each other. Honestly. So that way in 3 days, you're not asking me, why am I going out with my friends? Because I already told you could have time with yours. I love it.
Yeah. I'm prepared for every situation. Because he'll be like, oh, so-and-so called to ask me to go out. But I'm like, well, you should go. He's like, no, I think I'm just going to come home and hang out with Grayson. I'm like,
you don't have to. Yeah.
I'm like crickets. Cause it's like, so when I'm going out, you know, that's when I feel guilty. Cause I want to be like, oh, I'm just going to stay home and hang out with the kids.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm out of it.
Right. You're like, and I've already stayed home. So now we're switching.
I was home all day.
Yeah. Like, well, I mean, I think that's the difference too, is that you're home with them like throughout the day, because her work doesn't really start like until night. And so I think that,
and my daughter does homeschool.
Yeah.
So they're both home with me all day.
Yeah. I mean,
it's funny because I had the mom guilt when I worked, when I was a full-time kindergarten teacher. I had the mom guilt because I was at school all day with someone else's kids, and then I would come home and I would be so tired for my own. or I would have to miss their little preschool and kindergarten
Oh
thing
yeah, that is
because
worse.
I couldn't get a sub for my class. There was no one there to
Mhm.
cover my kids. And as teachers, we get such limited time during the school year because we get summers off. So like I really had to use my time sparingly. So I had mom guilt there. And then plus doing teacher stuff on the weekends to be ready for the upcoming week. But then it was funny, I had the same guilt as a stay-at-home mom. Even though I was home with my girls all day long, I felt so guilty for being like, okay, I see y'all later. I am out. Like, dad is home. He's got it all under control. I will be back in a couple of hours. I still had that guilt, but there was one thing that really helped me to shift was that I realized that I was modeling for my kids
Mhm.
what life could look like for them when they're women, with whether they're single women or married women with children. I just was like, oh my gosh, I don't want them to grow up to feel like they have to be with their kids 24/7. And when they're not, that's a bad thing. But I also wanted them to grow up and know like, you have to put effort into your marriage or it's not going to necessarily work out. And so then there was that dialogue like, okay, Kim, you have to let go of that guilt a little bit because you have to show them how to be when they're grown-ups. So like they're little now, but they're watching and they're taking it all in. So as much as this is hard for you, you have to get over it, rip the band-aid out and go out with your friends and put your makeup on and do your hair and show them like you're a human besides a mom. Like go and show them that. So that helped a little bit with me be like, yep, daddy and I are going away for the weekend. We'll be back Sunday. We love you very much. And they're with their grandparents. And so they're spoiled rotten. So I'm like, I know you're fine. You're taken care of. Like you're not in like the side of the road waiting for some stranger to come
Right.
take you home. Like you're fine. You're cared for. I'll see you later.
No, and I think that provides me comfort because my kids also like they spend a lot of time with my husband's parents. And so when we do go away in a few weeks, they'll be with them and they're actually taking them on vacation. So, I mean, it's not like they're going to miss me.
They will, but at the same time, like they're living it up and they're
Right.
having their own experiences too. And knowing
Right.
like that's okay to have their own experiences and not to feel bad about like, oh my God, mom's not here or dad's not here. And so like maybe I shouldn't have this fun. Like, yes, go live it up,
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, I love what you said about, being able to model it for your kids, because I do think that, they listen and watch us like so much more than we think. And so being able to kind of model, like what I think and what my hope is for them, like in the future, if they ever do get married and, have kids themselves and, all of those things too, I think is important, so yeah, if they ever get married. Yeah. Well, I mean, right now my 9-year-old is telling me she's never getting married. So that's why I say if.
Right.
So
Yeah, she
anyway.
might change her mind. Well, my 12-year-old has like decided that she will get married, but if her husband has a hairy back, she's going to make him shave and he cannot have any hair on his stomach. And she's not going to touch his underwear. He's going to have to do his own laundry. And if he smells too sweaty or he farts a lot, then that's also like could be enough to like end it all. And I'm like, wow, girlfriend, I think you're gonna die a lonely lady.
Yeah.
Willing to compromise on some of these things.
I know. Yeah. The hairy back and stomach, not so much. Don't compromise too much on that. But the other things,
She's clear.
Yeah.
I
She
like
knows
it.
what she wants.
Yeah.
I liked it.
Sometimes I'm like, Lily, you can't have all of this set in stone just yet because you are just 12. So like you do
Right.
have to allow some room for some give and take here in this thing called life. But yeah, so
Right.
she apparently has it all figured out of like how her husband should be and all of these things. So I'm like, okay, well, we'll see if you actually stick to that, especially like I'm not going to touch his underwear. He's going to have to do his own laundry. I'm like, well, he might feel the same way about your underwear when to not do your laundry either. So you could both be doing your own laundry.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. Yeah. My kids, my 9-year-old is just, I don't know where the whole, like, I don't want to get married thing came from, but that's recent. That's very new for us. And so even my husband and I were
It's
like,
probably because you guys don't go on vacation.
I know, it's probably because funerals are date nights.
She's
Yeah,
like,
she's
shoot,
like-
if I have to wait to go to a funeral to have a
Right.
date night, like, yeah, I think I'm just going to take the bachelor life. She was like,
Yeah.
Tony seemed to have
Can't
it all
blame her.
figured out.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. No, I even asked her, I was like, is there something wrong with your dad and I's marriage? Like, why you don't want to get married? And she's like, no, I just don't want to get married. And so she has some friends that are like boy crazy. And I think that drives her crazy. And so she's just like, I think she's just kind of has never wanted to like, I don't know, like live for boys, I guess. And like, she just doesn't get it. So, and we keep telling her like, it's going to change, sort of thing. So anyway.
I love it. Strong, independent young ladies. I love it.
She is.
Yes. Yeah.
So, but going back to the laundry thing, so we also talked about like finding a balance. And so, I know for me, like I'm type A with the laundry. And so that is like one place where I'm like, nope, no one touches the laundry. But Chelsea, when we were talking balance, it was more about, finding balance as moms in our life, which kind of goes back to the whole date night vacay thing and not feeling guilty about it. But also something, Chelsea, that you encounter a lot is parents asking you about finding balance for their kids and their schedules, because first of all, I had to ask you, what is POM?
Dance team, like high school dance teams. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
cheerleading and POM are different.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I thought so.
Yeah. I've recently found that out because I think I said, not recently, but I mean, I think I kind of knew the difference, but I said something like, is she a cheerleader? And mom was like, she's on POM. There's a difference. I was like, okay.
And you've been corrected.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All right. So anyway.
So I don't know that we call it POM up in like the Northeast. So,
I think dance team.
Dance team. Okay.
Yeah.
So my
drill team.
A drill team. One. Yep. So my younger was like, I think I want to do dance team. I'm like, could we just stick to 2 hours of dance a week, please? Like, could we just stay right there? Because like dance team, they practice 4 nights a week. So I'm like, we also have Girl Scouts. And she's chiming in because she just came in from baking cookies and prepping the cookie dough. And she's like, and more sometimes. So she's like in the background now watching YouTube Kids as we're
tell her
recording.
I support that.
Miss Chelsea says she totally supports that, having danced more than 4 nights a week, because she owns a dance studio like Miss Valerie and Miss Heather. So her little face just lit up. Yeah. So
you should move to Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I think I'm such a Southern girl at heart because I love like being down South. And so I'm excited because in June, at the end of June, I'm going to Nashville for a couple of days for a wedding. And so my kids and I are road tripping. So, cause I was going to fly, but it was so expensive. And then like renting a car and all of that stuff. So I'm like, my cousin is always up for a road trip. So I'm like, Elena, what do you think about coming to Nashville with me? Like, you can go do your own thing while I'm at this wedding for a couple of hours Saturday evening, but we'll drive down Friday and then drive home Monday. So that gives us a whole day in Nashville. And she was like, I'm totally game. So I'm like,
oh, I love it.
I get to come down south.
I just went to Nashville like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have not been, so I'm super excited. So I will have to pick your brain, Chelsea, about like what to do in Nashville.
Well, see, I went like a road trip for a pageant. My assistant was in the Miss America pageant anyway, so I was there. I drove down, went to the pageant, and came home.
Oh, so she didn't do much.
I didn't do anything. Stay in a hotel. I can tell you where to not to stay.
Well, we did a whole Airbnb thing, because then it was like paying for parking at the hotel was like as much as the hotel room for that period of time. So I'm like, okay, I got to find another way. So that's when I was like, road trip, here we come. But anyways, I digress. So, but finding balance. So like, for instance, so my daughters do Girl Scouts, they do piano, Casey does dance, and then Lily will do sports at school. But then like trying to navigate all that. So in Casey's like, I want to do dance team. And then it's like 4+ nights a week. Plus we have homework and all of those things. It's like, like trying to manage that. And I did that when they were little. Monday through Friday, we had an after school activity. And by Friday, we were all exhausted and miserable. So I learned by exhausting us that we had to cap it at like 2 activities and that was it. So whether you do those same activities all the time or we switch them up, that's your choice, girls. But we can't be running all over Timbuktu and back doing 8,000 activities.
Yeah.
So Chelsea, what do you tell parents when they ask you about the whole balance thing? Like, how do you help navigate that?
Okay. So I usually start with like goals. Like, what are your goals? You know, and how do you feel like people achieve those goals? You know, and are these your kids' goals? Are they your goals? And like where that happens. And 9 times out of 10, their goals are to be really good or to be the captain or to get a scholarship or to dance after high school, you know. So when those things are your goals, you know, to be realistic, you know, you don't have to dance 7 days a week, but you just have to decide like somebody else is dancing 7 days a week. Okay. So there's that, but somebody will always be doing more.
Yeah.
And then you have to know how your kid works. You know, do they work well? Like long periods of time, or are they going to like go 50%, 4 hours a night, you know?
Yeah.
So it's interesting because some kids can do less and get more out of it. That's probably rare, but a lot of kids, you know, need consistency to be good at anything, you know, whether it's schoolwork or a sport, you know, because every time you're training, you should be getting something out of it. And that's our philosophy at our studios, that we train kids actually to learn something new or like to gain something. And whether you are a competitive dancer or a recreational dancer, we still expect kids to learn. We're not, you know, some studios kind of take more of like the babysitting, fun hangout route, and we want it to be fun, but it is fun for them to learn because then they gain confidence and they, you know, there's a lot of things that come with that. So yeah, I just navigate it with goals, you know, and I have to evaluate me because my daughter is super competitive dancer. And so I have to always kind of go back because there's days where she does not want to, you know, like she's exhausted and I know that. And then I have to decide, like, do I allow her that rest time or do I teach her that if these are your goals, you have to work when you're tired, you know?
Yeah.
So it really is, it's tough for me as a dance studio owner to talk to people because if you want something, then you have to do it. Like I can't guarantee you, you know, an A+ if you only are putting in half the work. Like, so it just depends on long-term goals and they don't happen overnight. And a lot of us want that instant, like, oh, they're all of a sudden great. I'm like, well, that's not how it works. Like she's great because she comes every day.
Yes.
Yeah. So it is tough. But my daughter hears this conversation a lot. And I do try to say, like, you don't have to do this just because I'm, you know, mom's doing that or mom promotes it. You do get to choose your own goals, but I'm going to talk to her just like I'm going to talk to other kids. And like there's days where she's upset because things aren't going her way, if you will. And I will say to her, like, why are you so upset? Like, what's the problem? Like, I don't even understand why you're upset because it's kind of random. And she'll just be like, well, I just know I could have done better. I could have worked harder, or I wish I would have stretched when you told me to, or I, you know, so it's just like, but she gets every aspect, like, or every viewpoint, you know, because she hears me complain about things that parents say, and she hears me as a parent, and she watches me as a dance coach. Like, so she hears it all. But
yeah, I think it's great though that she gets all of those perspectives because I think that gives her more of an ability to make the right decision for herself. But I think you said something that's so important is about having the conversation with them. So I know that my daughter has been at the same dance studio for, I think, at least 5 years. Maybe this might be her 6th year there. And it wasn't our first dance studio. So when my older daughter, Lily, danced, she danced at the studio. I danced it as a kid. And that one, I was like, okay, this has fallen off. It wasn't the level that it was when I was there. And Lily decided that she didn't want to dance. She wants to be able to dance in the way that she wants to and doesn't want to be told. So it's like, fine, I do accept that my daughter didn't want to be a dancer. But my younger, Casey, she does. So I'm like, okay, I have one dancer in the family. And but at both studios that Casey has danced at, there are times where you can see that clearly it's not the daughter who wants to be the dancer.
For sure.
It's the parent who's forcing her to dance, and she just looks so miserable. And so then that's the question I have for the parent. It's like, what about her dancing is serving you? Like, what about this dance that she's doing, this dance class, it benefits you? Because then it's like the parent is living vicariously through the kid. But then you also have girls who are full on committed, who stretch, who go to class every week, and they love it and it lights them up. And there isn't necessarily balance with that. And they're understanding of that and they're willing to do that. And then, okay, then that's the path you're willing to take. So we're going to be supportive of that. But just having the conversation to check in and say, like, how's it feeling? How's it going? Are you still feeling like you want to keep going? Like, do you feel like maybe after this year, you want to take a break or cut back on class? Or, I think it's a constant conversation because the journey is always evolving. So just keeping that door open so that they know that they have options and checking in with goals. And I think also too, it's like they're still growing and learning. So helping them to learn how to achieve the goals without killing themselves or getting to the point where they're exhausted and then they're falling behind on schoolwork, or there's a dance injury because they didn't stretch the way they were supposed to. So I don't think there's I always like to say it's a rhythm, because I don't think there's ever fully balanced, but it's like that rhythm of being able to navigate with it, like with the flow of dance life or soccer life or softball life or whatever it is.
Yeah. So I'm actually probably going to ask you a question on this because, okay, so I feel like parents don't really conversate much when things are going positive, right? Like when things are going great, they're never like, oh my gosh, that's so awesome. How did that feel? Or like, what do you think about that? What made it so great? Why did you get that skill? None of that. But when something bad is happening, the conversation, like, it gets like, everyone gets to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy. So I think it gets tough because when you say things to kids like, are you tired? Well, clearly they're tired. Like if they worked hard, but it like they create this snowball effect instead of like redirecting kind of this like positive achievement, So like how do you promote more of like a positive conversation? And it's like
around around the negative too.
Well, I just think that the negative is a natural like attraction for people to talk about. It's easier to talk about negative things than it is for people. Well, like, and I had a flood of positives. So don't get me wrong. Like today, last night, so many positive things. But in the process of this positive result, there's a ton of negative that is still being drilled into people's heads. And it's like that process is what I want to try to like, I don't know.
But how do you as a coach, when you're talking about positives and negatives, how do you as a coach, like when you see a dancer that's maybe not doing, I don't know, like something not right, like in the dance. So how do you look at that? What would be considered a negative and turn that into like a positive? Does that make sense?
Well, is that what you're? No, I'm asking like from a parent's point of view. Like, how do we get parents to engage in positive conversation with their kids about a sport? You know what I mean? Like, I think it's just easier because a kid will get in the car and be like, oh, I didn't do this, or I didn't get picked for this, but if they did something great in the classroom or they did whatever, rarely are they like, oh my gosh, I did blah, blah, blah. Because the positive's not talked about that much, I don't feel like. In the classroom, when kids aren't getting stuff, I don't know. I mean, me personally, I take it as a challenge. So I feel like as a teacher, I'm capable of teaching kids to do anything if they want to do it.
Yeah.
So the conversation with parents, it's like changing the conversation to that influence of like, do you love it? Did you like it? Oh, it was tough. That's okay. It was tough. It's supposed to be tough. Life's not easy, you know? So it's like, I try to really kind of connect the dots there, but I can't connect the dots at home. And so it's like, if kids go home and complain, then their parents think that they don't like something. And then their parents come to me and say like, hey, X, Y, and Z is happening. I don't know that they like it. So then I go to the kid and I'm like, hey, like, what's going on? Like, tell me about this. She's like, oh, I don't even remember. I'm like, well, yeah, you remember the conversation with mom? Like,
right. Cause like, guess what? Mom just came to me. So I think it's twofold. I think as humans, we're wired to focus on the negative because that's a survival thing. Like, so we are focused to like, cause like back in caveman days, like we were wired to focus on like if a saber-toothed tiger was going to jump out and get us and eat us. So we're just wired for that. It's like a survival mechanism. And we often don't even know that we're doing it. But I think the other piece of the puzzle is that so often kids are given that reinforcement for the negative. Like, so they instinctively complain because when they're complaining, their emotional needs are being met. And I think I shared these with you when I was on your podcast, but there are 6 of them. There are 4 that are primary and we need them like air, food, and water. And then there are 2 that are fulfillment needs and they're growth and contribution. So, but the 4 primary that we need are certainty, uncertainty, love and connection. That's 1. And then significance. And so it's often easier to get those needs met on a very surface level kind of way. And if we don't think those needs will be met like on a very deep level, we will do whatever it takes to get them met. So often it's easier to get for a kid to get their parents' attention with complaining, because then they're feeling significant, because it's like, oh, I didn't this, or oh, that was hard, or oh, this and this and this and this and this. And then the parents like, oh, and the kid's like, yep, I matter. Like I'm getting that, exactly. Like I'm significant. I'm getting the connection and the love from mom and dad. And it's like certain too, because it's like, I know when I complain, I get attention. Exactly. But then there's the uncertainty because they're like, well, I don't know what kind of attention I'm going to get. Mom and dad could be like, so loving, or they could be like, oh my God, enough with the complaining. I'm tired of hearing it. So it meets those 4 needs on a very high level. And it's easier that way because typically, like you said, the positive isn't talked about that much. So it's harder to get that connection. It's harder to get that significance, that certainty with the positive things, because usually the parents like, oh, fantastic. And then, we're driving home and that's it. And like, great, fantastic. I don't have to go too deep into that because you're awesome. Great job. So proud of you. And away we go. And then it's like, that's it. So then the kid's like, well, that didn't get me what I was wanting. So that's where, so I try to ask not necessarily why questions, but when Casey gets in the car, I'll say, so how did dance go? And usually she's like, it was great. It was fun. I was like, well, what was fun? So then, or what was great? And so then I forced her to answer the questions. And sometimes she doesn't want to. And I'm like, okay, if there's anything else you want to share, I'm listening, and, we continue on home. But it's just trying to encourage them, like giving them that same level of response for the positive that they get for the negative. And it starts to condition them to be like, oh, I actually get this same stuff, and it's better when it's positive than when it's negative. So it's just something that we're just conditioned to, mostly because of the way that the brain is wired, where we're naturally focused on the negative. Right. And we get more feedback usually with something negative than we do for something that's positive.
Yeah, no, that all is so true. It's like, it's so true on so many levels. So, I mean, I appreciate that. I think the 4 needs should be like a highlight, a needs and wants, because I think that's something that's so true for every kid. And when we talked about this, when you were on our podcast, we really like talked about our kids, like, oh, I know my kid needs this more. And then I actually started thinking about it, like in class, like, oh, this kid needs this more than this, or she wants to feel significant, or she needs to feel like I really care about what she's talking about, whether I care or not, So it's like,
and those needs are really what drive our behaviors. So we run these patterns to get those needs met. So like the constant complainer gets those needs met through the complaining, like the perfectionist gets those needs met.
How do you shift those?
So you have to figure out what the pattern is and what triggers the pattern. So like it could be that maybe at home the child doesn't feel like they get enough attention because like maybe they're the third sibling or the fourth sibling and they're like the bottom, you know, they're the youngest. So like by the time it got to them, mom and dad are like, oh, we got nothing left. The tank is empty. So they'll run this pattern to get attention. So like there's a video of my husband when he was 6 and we call it Kids 88 because it was filmed in 1988. And so he's the youngest of 3 boys and my in-laws had 3 kids in 5 years. And so I think Brian was like 11ish and Dan was 8. And so my husband is like the utmost brat on this video. He's like screaming and whining and fussing. And at one point he's like, I hurt my ankle. And no one paid a lick of attention to him, like none. And it was like clear that he's acting out in this bratty behavior because all the focus was on Dan and Brian and not him. So he was like looking for someone to be like, you're great, Pete. Good job, buddy. So he was like, look at me. And he's like standing on the swing. And then he was like, look at me. And he like kicked the ball and he's like, look at me. And he threw the stick. Like he was just screaming like, look at me. And it's because he was the youngest of 3 boys. So by the time they got to him, they're like, yep, your ankle's not hurt. Yep, great. You're throwing a stick. Like, yep, seen it, done it. Like, yep. So they run these patterns. And so sometimes there's a trigger for the pattern. So it's helpful to figure out what the trigger is, but it's also helpful to figure out what the meaning is that they attach to it. So like the pattern of perfectionism, if it's like, you know, if my schoolwork isn't perfect, or if my dancing isn't perfect, then people are going to think I'm not good enough, or people aren't going to like me, or people are think that I'm stupid, or whatever the case is. Then it perpetuates that pattern because they're like, okay, I have to be the best. Everyone has to see that I'm smart. Everyone has to see that I'm good. So they'll run that pattern to keep that meaning going and to get those needs met. So it's helpful if you can figure out the motive for the pattern to shift it into something more positive, into a more serving pattern.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I mean, I would literally have you come to my studio and do that with my kid, with the dancers, you know, because I think just like long term, they need to be able to know, you know, like how it's normal to want these needs met, right?
Yeah.
But like how we get them met is the thing that we literally tell the dancers all the time. Like, this is how this works. If you love dancing and you go home and complain every single day, what will naturally happen is your mom will probably take dance away.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not telling you to not go home and tell them if something's wrong, but what I'm telling you is like, just be aware of the information that's like going, you know?
Yeah.
Or they're so upset when we get the phone call. And I'm like, I mean, your mom's not like psychic.
Right.
Like, somebody
like,
told
going on what you told her. Yeah. Oh my God. You can zoom me in. Zoom me in. I would love to talk to your dancers.
Oh my gosh, that would be so fun. And the other thing that I was going to ask is like, I mean, and it could be different, I guess, but I don't feel like when we were kids, or you were probably a child and in sports, the teacher was always right.
Yes.
There was never like, nah, I'm calling a teacher.
Yeah. Oh, well, see, my dad was good because he would call. So like there are a few times where I was like the Spanish teacher in middle school took points out of my Spanish notebook because I wrote in purple pen, but my friend also wrote in purple pen and she didn't get points taken off. So I was like, oh, that is not going down like this. So I went home and then at the end of the year, the Spanish teacher was like, because my Spanish name was Veronica. She was like, Veronica, you still got an A in my class, even though you had your father call me about your notebook. And so, so I was very much like, if I felt like I was wronged, I was like, Dad, you need to call. So my dad was good about calling, but you're right. Like it was always that the teacher was right. And now, so no, that was one of the reasons I burnt out, was because like, who went to school to be a teacher, me or you? Me. I have the masters and the bachelors. I got this. Like, trust me.
Yeah, it's just so different. You know, like if I would have went home from sports and been like, I wasn't able to do this, or they sat me on the bench for like 4 innings and I was at practice every day, he'd be like, okay,
I know. Yeah.
Like there's the next game. Get over it, Chelsea.
Yeah.
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 Well, and we were on the same we played basketball together.
Mhm.
I mean, ballers over here.
Right.
But we sat the bench
A little bit.
a little bit whenever
We're
we were
short.
Yeah, we're short.
I have a mean 3-point.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
so everyone knows.
But yeah, I mean, my parents, and in fact, like my dad, I remember one specific basketball games before you and I started playing together. It was, I like got mad at a ref because of something. Yeah. I mean, I was like very
Not Beth with type A personality, never.
Yeah, I was like very aggressive as a basketball player. And so I got mad at a ref and was like, saying some stuff. And my dad was like so embarrassed. And then my coach sat me on the bench and I was just like, and just like so upset. This was when I was like in 6th or 7th grade. And my dad afterwards, he like grabbed my shoulder and I knew. I was like, I'm in so much trouble. And so then as we were walking out, he's like, you will never act like that again. And, where like, I feel like now like parents would be like, oh yeah, you like that ref was totally wrong. Like, this and that and the other, because there's just like validation of, like the feelings or whatever. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm like a hardcore parent, but my oldest daughter always wants to quit her activities that she's doing when it gets hard. Yeah. And so like recently she did an invention convention because she's in the gifted talented program, and she didn't want to do it because it was so hard. And I was like, we have to make a model of your invention. You have a really great idea, but we have to do work. Like you're not just going to be able to naturally get a good grade on this or for it to just like pop out of thin air. Like we have to actually put it together. And she just was like, I want to quit GT. Just immediately wanted to quit. And I was like, yeah, no, that's not how life works. Like you can't just like up and quit your job if like your boss tells you you need to do something better, or you got like a meets expectations, you need to like perform better. And anyway, and so
it goes back to that uncertainty. It's hard to not have the certainty. So like when what hits the fan, the two needs that people go to first, it's always significance and certainty, or flip it, certainty and significance. So it could just be that your daughter overvalues certainty and then significance. Mm-hmm. And so for her, like the uncertainty of like how this is all the invention convention is going to shake out is just too much. So that's where it's like you can put in little pieces of structure, like, okay, day 1, this is what we need to do. Day 2, this is what we need to do. Day 3, this is what we need to do. So it's not so overwhelming. And then it creates that certainty for her. But also too, it's like my 12-year-old is the same way. If it's hard or she thinks she's not going to get a perfect score or perfect grade, she's like, not interested, not doing it. But it's like, we have to do it because you have to learn how to persevere and be able to bounce back when things get tough, because that's life. It's a roller coaster. Life. So like buckle up and enjoy the ride.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Beth and Chelsea, this is great. I feel like we could chat all day. I have to have you.
honestly, it really could.
We like after you were on our podcast, we were like, oh man, I wish she lived here.
Yeah,
like, we
right.
Would her.
Road trip. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do.
Tony
no
is
mom guilt road trip, and we're gonna meet halfway.
Yes.
So I live in Pennsylvania. You ladies live in Oklahoma. We'll find the halfway point and we'll do a road trip.
Isn't it Florida?
Yeah, totally. That only takes me 20 hours by car, but sure.
Same. 22.
Yes.
Okay.
Orlando, though.
24. Right?
No, it's like 20 to Orlando.
Oh, okay.
But
perfect.
if we're going to like Destin or Fort Walton, we're looking at like a 13-14 hour drive.
Oh, okay.
If it's just us, we don't have kids with us.
We went to Panama City like 6 times on spring break.
Yeah, we did.
Oh, yeah. Love it. Okay. There it is. It's done. It's planned. It's organized. We're going to make it happen.
Yeah. And I'll give your daughter dance lessons if she's around.
Right. So we can do a mom and daughter trip.
Okay. Well, we have 2 trips then. We'll do both.
Yeah.
Okay. A mom trip only, and then a mom and daughter trip.
Yeah, we got to balance this.
Yeah. My 9-year-old's like, I get to go, and she's she's back here cheering away. She's like, I get to go. So oh my God, it's been great chatting. So yes, Plans are in the making, and I'll definitely have you ladies on again. So before we wrap up this episode, just a word from my sponsor. This episode of One of a Kind You is brought to you by the Be Well, Be Safe, Be Happy, Eat Ice Cream podcast, which is a podcast you should really listen to. Why is that? Well, it's because this podcast is setting a new standard when it comes to health and wellness, keeping weight off permanently and transforming your life by narrowing the gap from where you are to where you want to be. This podcast is a prime example of everyday people just like you who have lost weight and kept it off permanently and have transformed their lives into the person they were meant to be, exactly what you want for you in your life. I personally have been a guest on this podcast and have listened to some of the episodes myself about living your best life, living a happy and healthy and fulfilled life. However, not just me. So don't just go by my recommendation. You should totally check it out with yourself. Go to trainingwithcoachbrad.com, click podcast on the menu bar for 2 reasons. 1, so you can see the episodes for yourself and see which ones would be best for you. And 2, so you can hear real life stories of what others have done and how you can apply what they have learned to your life to overcome any struggle you may have going on. You can also search for the Be Well, Be Safe, Be Happy, Eat Ice Cream podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. So give the show a try, and don't forget to push the subscribe button so you can add it to your regular rotation. Mention you heard this ad on the One of a Kind You podcast and receive a free PDF copy of Coach Brad's book, Mind Strong. It's a book all about elevating your life to the next level. So thank you to the Be Well, Be Safe, Be Happy, Eat Ice Cream podcast for sponsoring this episode. And if you thought this episode was helpful, feel free to share it with a friend, because the more the merrier. And if you would be so kind to leave a review, I would greatly appreciate it, because I take the time to review all of them to be sure that this podcast continues to be a place of support and guidance and a resource so that all of us moms can stick together. So thank you so much for tuning into another episode of One of a Kind You, and I will see you all next week.